Nobody expected what happened the moment Ella Bright and Belmont Cameli walked onto Jimmy Fallon's stage. What looked like a fun late-night interview was about to turn into one of those celebrity moments that fans would replay again and again. A single question, an unexpected confession, and a reaction that nobody saw coming would leave the audience stunned. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to The Truth Narrator, and tell us in the comments, have you ever seen a celebrity reveal something they probably never planned to share on live television? The lights inside the Tonight Show studio glowed brightly as the audience erupted into applause. Jimmy Fallon stood smiling in the center of the stage, ready to welcome two of the fastest rising stars in entertainment. Ella Bright and Belmont Cameli entered with confident smiles, waving to the crowd. On the surface, everything seemed normal. The audience expected laughter, jokes, and promotion for their hit series off campus. But beneath the smiles, there was an energy in the room that felt different. Jimmy leaned forward with his trademark grin. So, first of all, congratulations. Off campus is absolutely exploding right now. The crowd cheered. Belmont laughed nervously. Yeah, it's been kind of insane. Kind of insane. Those words seemed simple, but there was something in his expression that hinted at the overwhelming pressure suddenly surrounding both stars. Jimmy turned toward Ella. You've got one of those accents that keeps confusing everybody. 1 second people think you're from New York, then suddenly they hear something else. The audience laughed. Ella smiled. I get that all the time. She began talking about growing up between different places, moving between cultures, and constantly being asked where she was really from. The crowd loved every second of it. But then Jimmy shifted his attention toward Belmont. And that's when things started becoming interesting. So Belmont, before Hollywood, before all this fame, what jobs were you doing? The audience settled in. Belmont laughed. Oh, where do I start? Jimmy raised an eyebrow. That single question opened a door nobody expected. Belmont began describing his early life. He talked about carrying golf bags as a caddy under the hot summer sun. He described working as a Little League umpire while parents screamed from the sidelines. The audience burst into laughter. But Belmont kept going. There was also a period where I modeled T-shirts. The crowd laughed louder. Jimmy nearly fell out of his chair. Wait! You modeled T-shirts. Belmont nodded. In Wisconsin. The audience exploded. Jimmy stared at him dramatically. You're telling me one of television's biggest rising stars started by modeling T-shirts in Wisconsin. The laughter echoed throughout the studio. But behind the jokes was a deeper story. Years of struggling. Years of uncertainty. Years wondering whether any of it would ever matter. As Belmont spoke, the audience could sense it. The success they were witnessing now had not appeared overnight. It had been earned. Every awkward job. Every rejection. Every moment of doubt. And suddenly the conversation felt less like a comedy interview and more like a glimpse into two lives that had changed forever. Then Jimmy asked a question that shifted the entire atmosphere. What's been the craziest moment since Off Campus blew up? For a second, both actors exchanged a look. A very quick look. The kind that lasts less than a second but says everything. The audience noticed it. Jimmy noticed it. And then Ella smiled. A smile that suggested something unbelievable was about to be revealed. What happened next would leave the entire studio speechless. The audience leaned forward. For a brief moment, the bright lights of the studio seemed to fade into the background as Jimmy Fallon waited for an answer. Ella Bright and Belmont Cameli exchanged another glance. It was a kind of look shared between two people who had experienced something so surreal that even talking about it still felt unreal. Jimmy noticed it immediately. Oh, come on, he said with a grin. That look means there's a story. The crowd laughed. Ella covered her face for a second, already embarrassed. Belmont shook his head. You tell it. No, you tell it, Ella fired back. The audience erupted. Jimmy pointed at them dramatically. This is exactly what happens before someone reveals something crazy. More laughter. Then Ella finally took a deep breath. Okay, she said. We were scrolling through Instagram. The audience listened carefully. And suddenly we realized someone very famous was following us. Jimmy's eyes widened. How famous? Belmont laughed nervously. Very famous. The suspense in the room was growing. Jimmy looked from one actor to the other. Well, Ella finally said the name. Jennifer Lopez. For a split second there was silence. Then the entire studio exploded. Gasps, cheers, applause. Jimmy jumped from his chair. No way. The crowd roared even louder. Belmont laughed. That was basically our reaction. The two actors described the moment they discovered it. At first they thought it was fake. Then they checked again, and again, and again. Each time, the result was the same. One of the biggest stars on the planet was following them. The audience could see the disbelief still written across their faces. Even now, even after the success, even after millions of viewers had embraced off campus, some part of them still felt like ordinary people trying to understand an extraordinary reality. Jimmy smiled. That has to be the moment when it finally felt real. Belmont nodded. Honestly, yeah. For a second his voice became more serious. The laughter faded. The room became quieter. You spend years hoping someone notices your work, he said. Then suddenly things happen that make you realize people are actually watching. The audience applauded. The emotion felt genuine, not rehearsed, not polished, just honest. Jimmy leaned forward. For people who haven't seen Off Campus yet, what exactly makes the show so special? Ella smiled immediately. She had clearly answered this question many times before, but tonight felt different, because the passion was impossible to hide. It's an ensemble story, she explained. There's hockey, romance, music, friendships, heartbreak. As she spoke, fans in the audience nodded enthusiastically. Belmont jumped in. It's really about finding your place. The words hung in the air. Finding your place. Suddenly, the show sounded like more than a simple romantic drama. It sounded personal. Jimmy pointed at them both. So basically, you're the new Troy and Gabriella. The audience gasped dramatically, then burst into laughter. Ella immediately laughed. Oh no. Belmont threw his hands up. You said it, not us. Jimmy refused to back down. Come on, tell me I'm wrong. The crowd cheered. The comparison to High School Musical instantly ignited excitement throughout the studio. Ella tried to hide her smile. Belmont looked equally amused. For a moment, the atmosphere became playful again. But underneath the jokes, something bigger was happening. The audience was witnessing two young stars standing at a crossroads. The success of Off Campus had transformed their lives. Every interview, every headline, every social media trend, every fan reaction. The pressure was growing, and the spotlight was becoming brighter. Then Jimmy suddenly changed direction. Speaking of things fans are obsessed with, the grin on his face instantly made the audience laugh. Ella narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Oh no. Jimmy pointed directly at her. The helmet. The crowd erupted. Ella immediately buried her face in her hands. Belmont laughed so hard he nearly doubled over. The audience knew exactly what Jimmy was talking about. A simple bike helmet from the show had somehow become one of the biggest memes among fans. Social media had turned it into an icon. Fan edits, memes, reaction videos. The helmet was everywhere. Jimmy held up a prop version. The audience screamed. Ella looked completely shocked. You're kidding me. Jimmy proudly displayed it like a priceless artifact. Nope. The studio exploded with laughter. But as the noise filled the room, nobody realized the most unexpected moment of the entire interview was still waiting around the corner. Because in just a few minutes, a conversation about fan culture, strange traditions, and one bizarre piece of show terminology would send the interview into absolute chaos. And by the end of it, Jimmy Fallon himself would find himself doing something nobody in the audience could have predicted. The laughter from the helmet reveal was still echoing through the studio when Jimmy Fallon leaned back in his chair with a mischievous smile. The audience could sense he wasn't finished. Not even close. All right, Jimmy said, holding up a card. I've been reading fan comments, and apparently there are some terms from off campus that people are desperately trying to understand. The crowd cheered immediately. Ella Bright laughed. Belmont Cameli looked nervous. And that reaction alone made Jimmy grin even wider. Oh, this is going to be good. The audience laughed. Jimmy looked down at his card dramatically. First question. He paused. The room grew quiet. What exactly is a puck bunny? The crowd instantly reacted. Some laughed. Others gasped. A few fans shouted answers from their seats. Jimmy looked around dramatically. See? Nobody knows. The audience erupted again. Ella covered her face. Belmont pointed at Jimmy. You knew exactly what you were doing when you asked that. Jimmy smiled innocently. Me? Never. The laughter continued. Ella finally explained the phrase, describing it as a fan who was extremely devoted to hockey players and the hockey scene surrounding the sport. The audience nodded. Mystery solved. Or so they thought, because Jimmy wasn't done. Not even close. Okay, he said. Now I need answers about those drinks. The audience immediately became curious. Belmont laughed. Oh no. Jimmy leaned forward. You guys make those drinks look amazing on screen. Ella shook her head. That's movie magic. The audience laughed. Then came the revelation. The drinks viewers admired weren't delicious at all. Far from it. Some contained bizarre combinations designed only to look good on camera. Vanilla almond milk, orange juice, other ingredients mixed together in ways that sounded absolutely terrible. The crowd reacted with collective disgust. Jimmy nearly spit out his water laughing. You mean people are watching this thinking, wow, I want that drink, while you're sitting there suffering? Exactly, Belmont admitted. The audience exploded. The interview had become one surprise after another, but the biggest moment was still coming. Jimmy suddenly stood up. The audience immediately sensed something unusual. Whenever Jimmy stood up unexpectedly, chaos usually followed. Now, he announced dramatically, I've heard about something called the sexy little dance. The studio erupted. Ella's eyes widened. Belmont laughed nervously. No. Jimmy pointed toward them. Yes. The crowd cheered louder than at any point during the interview. Within seconds, music began playing through the studio speakers. The audience started clapping along. Jimmy stepped into position. Ella laughed so hard she could barely stand. Belmont looked like a man questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. Please tell me we're not actually doing this, he said. Jimmy was already attempting the first move. The audience lost control. Laughter filled every corner of the studio. Then something unexpected happened. Ella joined in. Belmont followed. And suddenly all three were performing the routine together. Not perfectly, not professionally, but enthusiastically. The crowd erupted into non-stop applause. Phones appeared everywhere. People knew they were witnessing a viral moment in real time. By the time the dance ended, the audience was on its feet, cheering, laughing, celebrating. The atmosphere felt electric. Yet what happened after the cameras stopped rolling may have been even bigger. Within hours, clips of the interview flooded social media. The Jennifer Lopez revelation spread across entertainment accounts. The helmet moment became a meme once again. The strange drink confession sparked thousands of reactions. And the sexy little dance exploded across platforms as fans recreated the routine themselves. Comment sections filled with reactions. Best interview of the year. Ella and Belmont are hilarious. Jimmy completely lost control of the show. Off Campus just gained another fan. Entertainment blogs picked up the story. Fan pages analyzed every moment. Reaction channels broke down the interview frame by frame. What began as a simple promotional appearance had transformed into a cultural moment. For Ella Bright and Belmont Cameli, it was another reminder that their lives were changing faster than ever. For fans, it was proof that behind the fame, the headlines, and the viral success were two people still trying to process the unbelievable journey they were living. And for everyone watching, it became one of those rare interviews that felt genuine, chaotic, and unforgettable all at once. Now we want to hear from you. Which moment shocked you the most? Was it the Jennifer Lopez revelation, the famous helmet story, the disgusting drink confession, or Jimmy Fallon joining the sexy little dance? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dramatic celebrity story, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to The Truth Narrator for more explosive Hollywood moments, shocking interviews, and unforgettable stories that the world can't stop talking about. Until next time, the truth is always more dramatic than fiction.